Montana Territory, September 1884. A cold wind carried the first bite of autumn across the Bitterroot Mountains the morning Adeline Mae Mercer knocked on a stranger's door with nothing but the clothes on her back, a bruised apple in her pocket, and a prayer that anyone might show her kindness. The cabin stood quiet on a ridge above the valley, smoke curling from its chimney. It was sturdy, weathered, and alone like her. She raised her hand and knocked once before her courage could unravel. The door opened. The man who stood there was tall, lean, with sleeves rolled to his elbows and sawdust in his dark hair. He looked like he had not expected company this early, or maybe ever. His eyes, gray and watchful, landed on hers, and something in his face shifted, softened. Adeline lowered her gaze. "I am sorry. My name is Adeline Mercer. I do not have a dowry or family. I was supposed to marry a man in Helena, but he never met the train. I have nowhere else to go." He said nothing for a moment. She could feel his eyes on her, probably thinking how foolish she was, how desperate. Then he stepped back and said, "Come in. You look half frozen." She blinked, surprised, but stepped inside. The warmth hit her skin like a blanket. There was the smell of wood smoke, coffee, and something faintly sweet. The room was simple, a stone hearth, a worn table, 2 chairs, and far too much silence. "I'm Warren Keller," he said, closing the door behind her. "This was my wife's cabin. She passed last winter." Adeline turned, her hands clasped tight. "I am sorry." He nodded once, then went to the stove. "You hungry?" She hesitated. He looked at her again, not unkind. "I got coffee. And bread, if you do not mind it rough." Her stomach answered for her. He poured her a tin cup and set a small plate in front of her. She sat carefully, like she did not want to leave any mark behind. Warren sat across from her, hands around his own cup. He did not ask questions right away. He just let her eat. After a while, she said quietly, "He was my cousin's friend. A cattle buyer. Said he needed a wife. I had nothing left back home in Wisconsin, so I came." "You get his name?" "James Lott. But the station master in Helena said he left town 3 days before I arrived. No one has seen him since." Warren leaned back in his chair. "You walked all the way from Helena?" "Mostly. A man with a wagon gave me a ride as far as Lolo. I walked from there. That is over 20 miles. She looked down at her coffee. "I did not have a choice." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The fire popped. Outside, the wind picked up. Warren stood and pulled a quilt from the corner, setting it around her shoulders. "You are safe here, Adeline." She looked up at him, and something loosened in her chest. The next morning, Warren went out to chop wood. Adeline swept the floor without him asking. She washed the dishes. She split the bread in half so it would last longer. By the 3rd day, she had mended 2 of his shirts and laid a pot of beans on the stove before he returned. "I do not expect you to work," he said, setting down his axe. She looked at him from the hearth. "I was raised to pull my own weight." He gave a small nod. "You have." It was not much, but something passed between them, then something new. She felt it settle inside her like warmth in the cold. Their days grew into quiet rhythm. Mornings were cold, but the fires burned steady. Adeline took over the cooking, and Warren did not complain. He showed her how to trap rabbits, how to check snares, how to read the sky when snow was coming. She listened closely. She remembered everything. One evening, as the light slipped behind the hills, he said, "I have not heard someone laugh in this cabin since last year." Adeline looked up from her sewing. "I am not sure I remember how." He smiled, small and real. "Then we will figure it out together." That night she stood on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. Warren came out beside her. "I do not want to be a burden to you," she said. "You are not." "I do not have anything to give." He looked at her, his voice steady. "You gave me company again. Peace. That counts for more than silver. She turned to him. You do not know me. I know you showed up with nothing, and never once asked for pity. I know you work hard. I know you are braver than most men I have met. Her breath caught. I am not looking for a wife, he said. But I would not mind you staying. She looked up at him. I am not sure what I am looking for either. But this feels like a beginning. He nodded. Then let it be one. The next morning, when she stepped outside, there were 2 children standing by the path. A boy and a girl, both under 10. Their faces were hollow with cold and hunger. The boy held the girl's hand tight. Adeline knelt down. Where is your family? The boy's voice cracked. Gone. They left us in the woods. Warren stepped out behind her, eyes narrowing. Zeke and Zadie. They belonged to a trapper who passed through last spring. I heard he was heading north. Guess he never came back. Adeline wrapped the girl in her shawl. We cannot leave them out here. We will not, Warren said. They brought the children inside. Warren boiled potatoes. Adeline bathed them both with warm water and wrapped them in clean linens. That night, they sat around the fire, all 4 of them, and for the first time since Adeline had arrived, the cabin felt full. Later, as the children slept curled under quilts, Adeline whispered, They need us. Warren looked at her. So do I. She turned to him slowly, her voice barely above a breath. I think I need you too. He reached out, fingers brushing her cheek. You changed this place, Adeline. You changed me. Her heart beat hard in her chest. Then let me stay. Not just here. With you. He leaned forward, forehead resting against hers. You already are. And outside, the wind stilled. The world felt quiet and right again. The first frost came overnight, whitening the fields near the creek and sheeting the pump handle in a thin skin of ice. Warren rose early to bank the fire, careful not to wake Zeke and Zadie, still curled together on a straw ticking by the hearth. Adeline had already stirred. She was at the table, peeling the last of the potatoes by lantern light, her shawl drawn tight around her shoulders, her fingers red from the cold. She didn't speak until she noticed him watching. There's not much left in the root cellar, she said. We'll need to stretch what we have. He nodded, rubbing the stiffness from his neck. We'll ride into Stevensville tomorrow. I can trade pelts for flour, salt, maybe a ham if I can swing it. She set the knife down. I should come. You've barely had time to rest. I'm not made of glass, she said, voice even. And the children shouldn't be left alone. Warren crossed to the stove, poured hot water into a basin. I can ask the McKays to keep an eye on them for the day. They've got 4 of their own. One more mouth won't break them. Adeline's hands stilled. You trust them? They helped me through last winter. They're decent folk. She studied him a moment, then gave a faint nod. All right. That night she sat at the edge of the bed Warren had offered her since the first week, a curtained-off corner, not quite a room, but separate enough. She rubbed a bit of lard into her cracked hands, listening to the wind drag across the eaves. Warren was whittling by the hearth. The children had gone to sleep without trouble, though Zadie had started clinging to Adeline's skirts in the evenings, eyes wide with quiet need. You never said what you did before all this, Warren asked, not looking up from the piece of pine he was shaping. Adeline folded her hands in her lap. I worked as a seamstress in La Crosse. Mostly for traveling men's shirts, mending boots, that sort of thing. My mother taught me before she took ill. You so like someone who learned by need. I did. He set his knife down, brushing the curls of wood off his lap. The way you settled in here, it's like you've done this before. I haven't, she said, her voice low. But I watched my mother do what she had to. I learned early that no one was coming to rescue us. Warren stood, crossed to the window. The sky was cloudless and sharp with stars. You don't need rescuing now either. She looked over. No. But it's different, having someone who stays. He turned toward her, the firelight catching the edge of his jaw. I'm not going anywhere. They left early the next morning, riding double on Warren's mare, while Zeke and Zadie were left with the Mackays, a stout couple with broad smiles and quick hands. Adeline clutched Warren's coat against the wind, her cheek near his back, eyes fixed on the trail ahead. Stevensville was small but busy, wagon wheels crunching over frozen ruts, men haggling over sacks of grain, and steam rising from the smithy's chimney in thick gray clouds. Warren led her first to the trading post, where furs were weighed and bartered over a cracked oak counter. Adeline wandered to the shelves while he negotiated with the storekeeper, her fingers brushing tins of preserves, lengths of twine, and a bolt of faded blue calico. You like it? Warren asked behind her. She turned. It's too dear. I didn't ask that, he said. I asked if you liked it. She looked at the fabric again. It's the kind my mother used to make my Sunday dress from, when we had church. He didn't answer, but when they left, the calico was in the sack slung across his saddle. It wasn't until they were halfway home that she spoke again. You didn't have to get it. I know. She was quiet a while, then said, You didn't say much at the post. Didn't have to. You said enough with how you looked at things. She smiled, small and quick. That's so? You look at things like you're measuring what they'd cost in time, not money. She adjusted her grip around his waist. That's the only way I know how. That evening, Adeline spread the calico over the table and began cutting it carefully, her hands steady, her eyes focused with something close to peace. Zadie came to her side, watching. Is it for me? The girl asked. Adeline paused. No, little bird. This one's for me. But if there's enough left, I'll make you a ribbon. Zadie held onto her sleeve. I like you here. Adeline brushed a loose curl behind the girl's ear. I like being here. Warren stood across the room, arms folded, watching the light catch the edge of Adeline's hair where it fell loose from its pins. He didn't say a word, but something in him settled then, like the land itself had taken a breath and found it full for the first time in a long while. That night, after the children were down and the fire banked low, Adeline stood at the window, the blue calico pressed to her chest. She didn't turn when Warren came to stand behind her. I'll build another room, he said, before the first snow comes deep. She looked out at the stars. You don't have to. I want to. She turned then, slowly. He didn't reach for her, but his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. I never thought I'd feel this again. Not after. I'm not asking you to forget her, Adeline said. But I'm not her. I know, he said, voice rough. You're you. And that's what I want. She stepped closer, their breath mingling in the cold. Then don't build another room, she said. His eyes searched hers, and when he understood, he reached for her hand and held it like it was something sacred. They stood that way a long time, nothing between them but the hush of winter coming, and the promise of something steady and warm waiting on the other side. By early November, the snow had begun to lay itself down in earnest, covering the fields and ridge trails in a thick, soundless hush. The days shortened, and the evenings fell fast. At the cabin, things settled into patterns that felt less like survival and more like life. The children had taken to lessons at the table in the afternoons, Zeke careful and precise with his letters, Zadie more interested in drawing pictures in the margins. Adeline stitched while she taught, her voice even, her lap piled with mending. Warren worked outside as long as light allowed, splitting cedar, hauling water, reinforcing the barn roof with fresh shingles he bartered for in Stevensville. One evening, as Warren cleaned his boots at the door, Adeline rested a hand on the wall beside her. I was thinking about the shed, she said. We could clear it. Make it warm enough for a loom. Warren looked up from his laces. You planning to take in work? If I can get thread from Miss Keene come spring, I could weave. Trade cloth for sugar, maybe even a kettle. He straightened, brushing his hands on his trousers. If you're set on it, I'll help you clear it this week. We'll need to check the roof first. It sagged last winter. Adeline nodded, gaze steady. I want to help keep us afloat, not just ride on your back. You're not, he said. But I reckon you've never been the type to sit still. Her eyes softened. No, I never was. That night, after the children had gone to sleep and the snow had begun to fall again in slow, drifting flakes, Warren stood at the table running his finger along the map he kept folded in a drawer. He didn't notice her watching until she cleared her throat. You looking to go somewhere? He glanced toward her. No. Just thinking about the spring drive. I've always helped the McKays push their steers up to Missoula come May. Adeline stepped closer. You planning to go this year? I was, he said. But I won't if it means leaving you with too much. She leaned a hip against the table. I can manage fine with the children. But I'd rather you stayed. His hand stilled on the map. I've been doing that drive 5 years running. Then maybe it's time to stop running, she said, voice quiet. He met her eyes across the table. You think I've been running? I think we both have, she said. You from grief. Me from being unwanted. Maybe we've both earned a place to rest. He folded the map and set it aside. I never thought I'd want to stop. You don't have to decide now, she said. Just think on it. The next day, while Warren repaired the coop fencing, Adeline took Zadie out to gather kindling. The girl skipped ahead, pointing at rabbit tracks and tugging her mittens higher over her cold reddened wrists. Miss Adeline, she said, crouching beside a stump, when it's warm again, will you show me how to plant things? Adeline knelt beside her, brushing snow off a half-buried root. We'll start with carrots and beans first. Then see if we can't coax some squash out of this ground. Zadie reached for her hand. Mama never had a garden. She said it was too hard to stay one place long enough. Adeline's breath caught, but she squeezed the girl's fingers gently. Well, you're staying now. That night, Adeline found Warren at the barn, lantern casting a soft glow across the hay bales. He was running his hand over the mare's flank, slow and thoughtful. I've been thinking, he said without turning. Come spring, I'll fix the fence out past the creek. Maybe start pasture there. You're staying then? He looked at her over his shoulder. I think I already did. They walked back to the cabin in silence, boots crunching through the fresh snow. Inside, she poured water over dried chamomile, letting the steam rise between them. You ever think about what this place might look like in a year? She asked, settling into the chair beside his. He thought for a long moment. I think about chickens loose in the yard. I think about Zeke building a sled. I think about you, at the loom, humming. She smiled into her cup. I don't hum. You will, he said. When you're happy? She reached across the table, fingers brushing his. I am. He turned his hand under hers. Then I'll make sure you stay that way. The fire burned low. Outside, the snow fell steady as breath. Inside, for hearts beat quiet and full, under one roof that no longer held ghosts, only the weight of shelter, of warmth, of something built not from chance but from choice. The wind shifted near the end of November, coming down from the north with a dry bite that lifted powdery snow from the trees and scattered it across the roof in soft, ticking bursts. Inside the cabin, the air smelled faintly of resin and iron as Warren set the last of the horseshoes to cool near the hearth. Adeline sat at the table with a length of wool in her lap, marking out measurements with careful chalk lines. She had traded for the cloth the week before, a thick gray weave she planned to stitch into a coat for Zeke before the deeper cold came. Warren watched her hands for a moment, then said, I saw smoke by the old mill pond this morning. She looked up, brow furrowed. Anyone we know? Didn't recognize the horse? Looked like a lean rig. Single saddle. Could be a trapper passing through. Could be. She ran her thumb along the edge of the fabric. You want to ride out tomorrow? He shook his head. No sense stirring it yet. Let 'em come to us, if they mean to. That night, Warren took first watch while the others slept. He'd done the same the year before, when he and his late wife had wintered through a string of livestock thefts. But this time, the quiet didn't feel hollow. It felt like something worth guarding. Just before dawn, a knock sounded at the door. Not frantic. Not hesitant. Just firm. Warren opened it with his rifle low and ready. On the other side stood a man wrapped in a buffalo coat, face mostly hidden behind a wool scarf. His eyes were sharp under the brim of his hat. "Looking for a man named Lot," the stranger said. "James Lot. Heard he came through this way." Warren didn't move. "Ain't heard the name." The man's eyes narrowed. "He sent my sister a letter last spring. Promised a farm." She never heard from him after. Adeline stepped into the doorway behind Warren, her voice even. "What's your sister's name?" "Ellen. Ellen Merton." "From La Crosse." Adeline's throat tightened. "She was on the same train I took. We spoke once, near the water pump in St. Paul." The man tugged down his scarf. "She never made it to Helena. I've been following his trail ever since. I found her bag in a pawn shop. Found his name on a feed ledger north of Phillipsburg." Warren lowered the rifle. "Come in." The man's name was Thomas Merton. He was a carpenter by trade, and his eyes stayed on the door even once it was closed. He sat stiffly, his coat still on, as Zeke and Zadie stirred from sleep. Adeline gave them a quiet nod, and they climbed back into their blankets without protest. Thomas glanced toward her. "How long were you waiting before you found this place?" 3 days, she answered. "I'd been walking since Lolo." He swallowed. "I should have left sooner." "You couldn't have known," she said. Warren poured him a cup of broth. "You plan to keep chasing him?" Thomas wrapped his hands around the tin. "If I find him, he'll answer for what he's done." Warren met his eyes. "You'll want to be sure what you're chasing won't cost you more than it's worth." Thomas said nothing to that. By midday, he was gone, leaving behind a small carving knife for Zeke and a promise to write if he learned anything more. Adeline watched him go from the porch, arms folded against the cold. That night, as she stitched the shoulders of Zeke's coat, Warren sat beside her, working a new bridle strap with steady fingers. "He reminded me of someone," she said softly. Warren didn't look up. "Who's that?" "My brother. He died in a grain accident when I was 15. He was always trying to fix the unfixable." Warren set his work aside. "You ever wish you'd stayed back east?" She didn't speak right away. Then, "I used to think about it, when I couldn't sleep. But not anymore." "Why not?" "Because I didn't come here to be saved," she said. "I came to build something new. And I've found people who want to build it with me." He reached across the table, not with intent, just to rest his calloused hand over hers. She turned her palm up to meet it. Later, while the cabin slept and the fire dimmed to an orange cradle, Warren whispered, "I was scared, you know." Adeline shifted beside him beneath the quilt. "Of what?" "That letting someone in again would make me forget her." She traced the edge of his hand with her thumb. "You haven't forgotten?" "No," he said. "But I'm not afraid anymore." Outside, the snow fell again, quiet and untroubled. The fence line held, the roof didn't leak, and the walls kept the cold at bay. Inside, nothing was borrowed, nothing was owed. Everything was earned, and everything was given freely. And for the first time in either of their lives, home wasn't something they'd lost. It was something they'd reached together. The thaw came slow that year, dragging its heels through March. The snow melted in uneven patches, leaving behind slick ruts and the sour smell of old leaves. Ice broke from the creek in long, groaning sheets, and the trees stood bare-limbed and waiting. Inside the cabin, the children were restless, and so was Adeline. She watched the land each morning from the porch, arms folded, apron damp from rinsing linens. The garden plot she marked behind the barn still lay half-frozen, but she measured its edges again and again, pacing the ground with quiet persistence. Warren returned one afternoon with a coil of copper wire and a lopsided grin. "McKay's had extra?" Said they owed me for pulling their colt out of the ditch last month. Adeline looked down at the wire in his hands. You're fixing the fence by the south edge? He nodded. Figured if we're gonna keep goats come summer, we'd best get ahead of it. She tilted her head. Goats? Zeke, listening from the steps, perked up. Will they have horns? Some do, Warren said, ruffling the boy's hair. But they won't use them unless you give 'em reason. Zadie leaned against Adeline's skirt. Can I name one? Adeline bent to her, brushing a bit of ash from the child's temple. Only if you promise not to feed it biscuits. Warren watched the exchange, quiet. Later, as Adeline hung damp shirts on the line behind the cabin, he approached with a small burlap sack in hand. Found this in the barn loft, he said. Old seed packet. Thought it might be worth trying. She opened the sack, squinting at the faded lettering. Radishes. Figured they're fast growers. Might give us something while we wait on the rest. She looked up at him, eyes soft. You've been thinking ahead. A man does, when he's got something to stay for. The line between them had shifted without either of them saying when. No declarations. Just 1,000 quiet choices. That evening, Zeke and Zadie helped drag fallen branches from the edge of the clearing. They worked in tandem without being told. Adeline watched them from the porch, arms crossed, expression unreadable. They've changed, she said as Warren stepped up beside her. They've got roots now. She glanced over. What about us? He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. I know what I want. I've known since the first time you told me you had nothing and still stood up straight. She didn't look away. Then say it. I want you beside me. Not just through winter. Through everything. Her voice caught. I want that too. He leaned forward, slow, like asking permission. When their lips met, it was steady and sure, not rushed. She curled her hand against the side of his neck, and he breathed her name like a promise. They married in early April, with the creek running high and the valley greening by the hour. Mrs. McKay sewed Adeline a gown from old flour sacks and lace remnants, and Zadie tucked early violets into the hem. Zeke carried a pine ring Warren had carved himself. The ceremony was held beneath a cottonwood near the garden plot, the ground still soft beneath their boots. Warren wore his cleanest shirt, collar starched, hair combed back with water from the basin. His hands didn't shake when he took hers. Afterward they returned to the cabin, where bread baked in the hearth and the children danced in stocking feet across the floorboards. Warren pulled Adeline into a slow waltz, the fiddle music from the McKay's boy drifting through the open window. Didn't know you could dance, she murmured. Didn't know I'd ever want to again. She laid her cheek against his shoulder. This is ours now. He held her closer. It always was. By midsummer, the garden bore fruit. Zadie chased the goats through the yard, laughing until she collapsed in a heap of clover. Zeke built a slingshot from a bent branch and twine, and Warren taught him how to aim without harm. Adeline wove a bolt of gray wool into a shawl, her loom newly set in the cleared shed. She wore it in the evenings when the breeze off the hills cooled the porch. One night, as the sun dropped behind the western trees, golden and soft, Warren stood behind her with his hands on her shoulders. Never thought I'd live in a house full of laughter again, he said. She leaned back against him. I never thought I'd be loved for exactly who I am. He kissed the side of her head. You were made for this place. For these people. For me. She turned, resting her hands on his chest. Then I'll stay, as long as you'll have me. Always. The cabin stood silhouetted against the sky, smoke curling from the chimney, children's voices echoing from the barn. The land no longer felt like something to endure. It felt like something they'd claimed not with force, but with care, and work, and a love that had grown slow and deep, like roots under frozen ground waiting for warmth. And now, it had all come to bloom.